Imagine driving down an empty highway, the hum of your tires on the asphalt the only sound, the wind brushing against your windows. Everything feels normal until it doesn't. A strange feeling creeps into the pit of your stomach, a sense that you are not alone. That feeling becomes a thought, and that thought becomes an overwhelming certainty. You're being watched, but who or what is out there? Tonight, we're going to take you on a journey down one of the most infamous roads in America. A highway that isn't just a path through Florida, it's a stretch of land steeped in mystery, where reality blurs with the unknown, and every turn hides a potential encounter with the unexplainable. This isn't just about ghost stories, myths, or legends. It's about the eerie truth that stretches across miles of asphalt, where the living and the dead seem to coexist in a strange, unsettling dance. For generations, drivers have reported strange phenomena along this very road. Phantom lights, ghostly figures, and the unmistakable feeling that something or someone is trying to reach out. These stories aren't just tales to pass around at a campfire. They're experiences that change the way we see the world, shifting our perspective on the nature of reality. They make us question, what happens when we drive through the spaces where the living and the dead brush up against each other? And how does the unknown affect the way we think, react, and interpret the world around us? Tonight, we will unravel the chilling encounters that have taken place on Florida's most haunted highway, I-4. You'll hear stories of phantom phone calls, hitchhikers who vanish into thin air, and warnings from voices that shouldn't exist. Stories so vivid and strange, they'll make you rethink every time you pass a dark stretch of road. Prepare yourself. These aren't just stories, these are experiences that leave you questioning the very fabric of reality. By the end of this journey, you may find yourself looking over your shoulder on the quiet roads, wondering if what you've heard tonight might one day come for you. The history of Florida's Interstate 4, specifically the stretch known as the I-4 Deadzone, begins in a time before cars, highways, or even the bustling cities of modern Florida existed. In the late 1800s, a group of settlers from Germany arrived in the area, fleeing persecution and seeking a better life. They were a deeply spiritual and superstitious group, carrying with them their beliefs, traditions, and hopes for a brighter future. Among these settlers was a small family of four, a mother, a father, and their two young children. Their story would become one of tragedy, mystery, and a haunting that endures to this day. The family settled on a small plot of land near the St. Johns River, close to what is now Sanford. Despite the challenges of the wild, swampy terrain, they built a modest home and began to carve out a life. But their dream was short-lived. In 1887, a deadly yellow fever epidemic swept through the region, claiming lives indiscriminately. The family fell victim within days of one another, leaving behind no relatives to carry on their legacy. With no formal cemetery nearby, their neighbors buried them in a makeshift graveyard on their land, marking the burial site with simple wooden crosses. For decades, the graves remained undisturbed, a quiet reminder of lives lost too soon. The land passed through various owners, most of whom were unaware of its grim history. By the mid-20th century, however, Florida was undergoing a transformation. Developers sought to capitalize on the state's growing population and tourism boom. In the 1950s, the property was purchased by a real estate developer eager to build homes. It was during this phase of construction that the graves were rediscovered. Workers reported strange occurrences from the moment they began clearing the land. Tools disappeared without explanation. Others would be found lying in impossible locations, as though moved by unseen hands. Some workers claimed to hear faint whispers carried on the wind, though no one was around. Despite these unsettling incidents, the developers pressed forward, dismissing the workers' accounts as superstition or overactive imaginations. The graves were covered over with dirt and debris, left unmarked and forgotten. When plans for Interstate 4 were finalized in the 1960s, the route cut directly through the old burial site. Construction crews once again encountered the graves, but rather than respectfully relocating the remains, they simply paved over them. This act of desecration is believed by many to have unleashed a curse that has plagued the highway and its travelers ever since. From the moment the highway opened, strange and tragic events began to occur. The stretch of road over the old burial site quickly earned a reputation as the I-4 Deadzone. Within its first year, there were more accidents reported on this section than any other comparable length of road in the state. Locals whispered that the spirits of the forgotten pioneers were exacting their revenge, and the stories only grew darker with time. Drivers reported inexplicable phenomena. Cars would suddenly lose power as they crossed the dead zone, their engines sputtering to a halt without any mechanical reason. Headlights flickered on and off, leaving travelers momentarily blind. Some drivers described an overwhelming sense of dread as they approached the area, as though an unseen force were pressing down on them. Others claimed to see ghostly apparitions darting across the road, forcing them to swerve. When they stopped to check for injuries, there was no one there. No figures, no evidence, only the eerie stillness of the surrounding swamp. Truckers, who often drove the route late at night, became some of the most vocal witnesses. One particularly chilling account came from a long-haul driver passing through the dead zone on a foggy night. He saw what appeared to be a woman in white standing on the shoulder of the road, her pale face illuminated in his headlights. He slowed down, thinking she might be in need of help. But as he approached, she locked eyes with him, her expression one of profound sorrow, before vanishing into thin air. The experience left him so shaken that he refused to drive that route again. Local residents living near the highway began to experience their own share of strange happenings. Lights in their homes flickered at odd hours. Some reported hearing faint voices or footsteps in their hallways when no one else was home. Others claimed to see shadowy figures standing at the edge of their properties, only to disappear when approached. These incidents were often dismissed as mere coincidence. But for those who experienced them, the connection to the highway was undeniable. The newlywed couple, Lisa and Mark, had been on a celebratory road trip across Florida, blissfully unaware of the highway's grim reputation. Their GPS had malfunctioned earlier in the evening, leaving them to rely on a paper map they'd picked up at a roadside diner. As a violent thunderstorm swept over the I-4 corridor, their cheerful adventure turned into a tense struggle to stay on course. The rain came down in torrents, hammering the windshield and obscuring the road ahead. Lightning illuminated the sky in sporadic bursts, casting eerie shadows on the desolate highway. Mark squinted at the map while Lisa gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. "Are we even close to an exit?" she asked, her voice strained. Mark traced a line on the map with his finger, muttering something about a rest stop up ahead. Just as he finished speaking, the car radio crackled to life. At first, it was a burst of static, sharp and grating against their ears. Lisa instinctively reached to turn it off, but before she could, a voice emerged from the noise. It was low and distorted, as though coming from a great distance. "Turn back," the voice said, chillingly calm and deliberate. "Turn back before it's too late." Lisa slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly on the slick road. "Did you hear that?" she gasped, her eyes wide with fear. Mark nodded, his face pale. "It's probably just interference," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Could be the storm messing with the signal." But Lisa wasn't so sure. There was something unnatural about the voice, something that made her skin crawl. She glanced at the radio, now silent, as if waiting for it to speak again. Mark tried to brush it off, urging her to keep driving. Reluctantly, she pressed on, the car crawling forward through the downpour. Minutes later, they noticed a faint light in the distance. "There it is," Mark said, relief evident in his tone. "That must be the rest stop." The glow grew brighter as they approached, cutting through the rain like a beacon. But as they neared the source of the light, something felt off. The air inside the car grew cold, and a strange, metallic taste filled Lisa's mouth. The light began to flicker, its steady glow becoming erratic. Then, without warning, it disappeared entirely. The couple found themselves at the edge of a swamp, the murky water glistening under the faint light of the moon. Lisa gasped, realizing they had almost driven straight into the marsh. The supposed rest stop was nothing more than a cruel illusion. Shaken, they turned the car around and drove back the way they came. Neither spoke for the rest of the journey, their minds racing with questions they dared not voice. When they finally reached their destination, Lisa began researching the I-4 corridor, desperate to make sense of their experience. She discovered countless similar accounts, phantom lights, ghostly voices, and near-death encounters, all centered around the stretch of highway known as the Deadzone. The couple now refuses to drive on I-4, their once celebratory trip forever tainted by a brush with the unknown. The story of the hitchhiker on I-4 has become one of the highway's most terrifying legends, one that sends shivers down the spines of even the most skeptical travelers. Over the years, countless drivers have reported eerie encounters with a spectral young man who appears by the roadside looking for a ride. Each account shares a chilling similarity. The hitchhiker vanishes without explanation, leaving his would-be Good Samaritans questioning their sanity. One particularly harrowing account came from a man named Robert, a long-haul trucker with years of experience on the road. On a humid summer night, Robert was driving his rig along Interstate 4, heading toward Orlando. The air was heavy with the kind of oppressive stillness that often precedes a storm. As his truck rumbled through the Deadzone, his headlights illuminated a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. The man was young, no more than 20, and dressed in clothing that seemed oddly out of place, worn jeans and a tattered shirt that looked decades old. His face was pale, and his expression was one of profound sadness. Robert felt a pang of sympathy. Against his better judgment, he slowed down and pulled over. "You need a ride, son?" Robert asked, leaning out of his window. The young man nodded silently and climbed into the passenger seat of the cab. He moved with an unnatural stiffness, as though his limbs didn't quite work the way they should. Robert tried to make conversation, but the hitchhiker's answers were curt and unsettling. "Where are you headed?" "South," the hitchhiker replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's your name?" The hitchhiker turned to Robert, his hollow eyes meeting the trucker's. "It doesn't matter." As the truck continued down the highway, the atmosphere inside the cab grew colder. Robert noticed that the hitchhiker didn't fidget or look around like a normal passenger. Instead, he stared straight ahead, his gaze fixed on the road with an intensity that made Robert uneasy. Then the radio began to crackle. At first, it was faint static, but soon it grew louder, filling the cab with an oppressive white noise. Robert reached to turn it off, but the hitchhiker's voice stopped him. "Don't," he said sharply. Robert's hand froze. The hitchhiker's tone was commanding, almost otherworldly. Before Robert could respond, the young man spoke again, his voice now echoing with an eerie resonance. "You shouldn't be here. Turn back." Terrified, Robert glanced at the hitchhiker, but the passenger seat was empty. The young man had vanished, leaving behind only a faint, lingering cold that seemed to seep into Robert's very bones. Panicked, Robert pulled over to the side of the road and jumped out of the truck. He searched the cab and the surrounding area, but there was no sign of the hitchhiker. Shaken, Robert called a friend on his CB radio and recounted the experience. To his astonishment, the friend shared a similar story. He too had picked up a hitchhiker in the Deadzone, only for the passenger to disappear before reaching his destination. In the years since, Robert has avoided I-4 whenever possible. He's spoken to other truckers who've experienced the same phenomenon, and their stories are eerily consistent. The hitchhiker appears when you least expect it, warns you to leave, and then vanishes without a trace. Some believe he's the spirit of a young man who died in a tragic accident on the highway. Others think he's tied to the desecrated graves beneath the road, a restless soul forever trapped in the Deadzone. Regardless of his origins, the hitchhiker remains one of I-4's most enduring mysteries. A ghostly figure whose warnings continue to haunt those brave enough to pick him up. Even in the age of dash cams and smartphones, the I-4 Deadzone continues to defy explanation, its haunted reputation as strong as ever. Modern drivers and residents alike have shared chilling experiences that seem to confirm the highway's supernatural legacy. One of the most compelling accounts came from a family traveling to Disneyworld in the early 2000s. The Johnsons, a couple with 2 young children, were driving through the Deadzone late at night when their car radio abruptly lost signal. Static filled the speakers, followed by a strange, faint humming noise. Then the temperature inside the car plummeted. "Mommy, who's that?" their 6-year-old daughter asked, pointing out the window. The parents looked and saw a shadowy figure standing in the middle of the road ahead. It appeared to be a man, but his features were indistinct, shrouded in a mist that seemed to emanate from his body. Panicking, the father swerved to avoid the figure, but when they looked back, there was nothing there. The family reached their hotel safely, but the experience left them deeply shaken. When they later shared their story online, they discovered similar accounts from other travelers who had seen the same shadowy figure in the Deadzone. Some described it as a man, others as a woman, but all agreed that the figure vanished without a trace. Technology hasn't spared drivers from the highway's eerie phenomena. Dash cams have captured inexplicable footage, vehicles swerving to avoid invisible obstacles, strange orbs of light hovering above the road, and shadowy figures darting across the lanes. One particularly chilling video shows a semi-truck's headlights illuminating what appears to be a woman in a white dress standing in the middle of the highway. As the truck passes through her, she vanishes, leaving no trace behind. Even law enforcement officers have reported unsettling encounters. One deputy, tasked with investigating an abandoned car on the highway, described hearing footsteps behind him as he approached the vehicle. Turning around, he found no one there. Later, while reviewing body cam footage, he noticed a faint, shadowy figure moving behind him, something he hadn't seen in person. Residents living near the Deadzone have their own tales to tell. One woman recounted waking up to the sound of her dog growling at the back door. When she looked outside, she saw a pale figure standing in her yard, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The figure disappeared when she turned on the porch light, but strange symbols were later found etched into the dirt near her property line. The Deadzone seems to defy logic, its mysteries refusing to be unraveled even as technology advances. For those who live near it or travel its haunted stretch, the highway is more than just a road. It's a portal to the unknown, a place where the past refuses to rest and the line between the living and the dead grows dangerously thin. As we come to the end of our journey down the haunted stretch of I-4, we're left with more questions than answers. These stories, chilling and strange as they may be, are not just about ghosts and apparitions. They are a reflection of something deeper, something that resonates with all of us. They challenge the very way we understand reality, the way we interpret the world around us. What happens when we cross paths with the unknown? When we encounter something that defies logic and reason, we are forced to question everything we think we know. These experiences, whether they occur on a dark highway or in the quiet of our own homes, reveal that the world is not as simple as we once believed. There are things out there that we can't explain, and perhaps we're not meant to understand them at all. But here's the thing. These encounters, these eerie phenomena, they don't just exist to terrify us. They serve as a reminder that our understanding of the world is far from complete, and sometimes what we perceive as real may be only a fraction of the truth. Our minds, our hearts, and our senses are all connected to something much bigger than we can grasp. And in that vastness, there's a fine line between the living and the dead, between what is known and what is unknown. So the next time you find yourself driving down a quiet, empty road, the hum of your tires, your only company, think back to these stories. Think about the things that lurk just out of sight, in the shadows of our world. Ask yourself, how does the unknown shape the way you think? Does it make you more aware, more cautious, or perhaps more open to the mysteries that lie just beyond the horizon? We may never fully understand what happens in the dark corners of our world, but one thing is certain: these stories, these encounters, change us. They stay with us long after we've turned off the lights, long after we've left the highway behind. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most unsettling part of all.